once and for all in California that the definition of marriage, not domestic partnerships, not some other legal arrangement that can be made as an accommodation, but marriage is defined as one man and one woman.
I'd just like to say that when he's talking about Article 2 of the California Constitution, I don't think the state of California is a true democracy. I think it's a republic. We elect our leaders to enforce the laws and create the laws. And when we elect governors, they have the power to appoint Supreme Court justices. So we made the decision to elect those California governors who appointed Supreme Court justices who will overturn this law. Right? I mean, is that not true?
I would agree. I would just say, you know, if it is the primary responsibility of the United States Supreme Court to apply the U.S. Constitution and, you know, interpret how it affects laws passed by the citizens and the legislators. It is the primary responsibility of the California Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution as to how it applies to laws that are passed by the legislators and the citizens. And it is their prerogative to overturn something that is deemed unconstitutional. And in that case, it goes back that Proposition 8 is the recourse. And, you know, saying that judicial activism is an argument in favor of Proposition 8 is kind of like saying I have the right to shoot you because I have a gun. You know, it doesn't make it right. This is the recourse, you know, and it's going to fail.
One more point of this side.
Yeah.
I've got a question in my home.
Okay, I don't understand what the context of that false analogy that was just made was, but the reality is we have a serious challenge in this country that we face as a people, and that is the question of whether we are going to have elites and unelected, unrepresentative, albeit appointed, a much higher level of government with many filters before we get to have our say with those people are going to make the decisions for us, or whether the people themselves are going to clarify difficult and complicated issues. I would just quote Thomas Jefferson on your issue of the Supreme Court, who said that the Constitution of most of our states assert that the power is inherent in the people, that it is their right and duty to be at all times, it is their right and duty at all times to be consulted on matters that relate to them. The point is that the people are the ones that have the power vested in them, and not the courts to make law. The courts are to interpret law, and the law was clear what the definition of marriage was. It was very clear, one man, one woman, and they simply struck it down saying that that was unconstitutional. And now we're going to clarify that with Proposition 8.
Yeah, just real quick, I actually promised yes to let it be about 30 seconds.
Okay, just real quick, I just want to point out that I find it interesting that the Democrats think that somehow when 61% of the people voted to redefine or to reaffirm that marriage is defined between one man and one woman in the family code, that somehow when we vote on Prop 8, just because it's a constitutional amendment, that their opinion is going to be starkly different. I guess we'll see on November 4th, but I will point out that the Democrats over here are at odds with their presidential candidate, Barack Obama, who also believes that marriage is between one man and one woman.
I guess I find it a little bit rich to hear you guys complain about the will of the people when Proposition 4 has been put on the ballot twice before and been knocked down, and I support it. And as far as the responsibility of the court, they were able to interpret this law, and it was in conflict with the California Constitution, and the California Constitution takes precedent. So that law was knocked down. It's very simple.
I'd also just like to add one thing that I think we're being a little bit short-sighted. It wasn't too long ago, I think only 4 years ago, that we were having a similar debate about interracial marriage. People looked to the Bible to explain why blacks couldn't marry whites. People looked to the will of the people for why blacks couldn't marry whites. But 40 years later, it's so anachronistic, it's so wrong, and I fear that if this proposition passes, 40 years from now, we'll be wondering why.
By the way, that was another California State Supreme Court decision that preceded Loving against Virginia. 4 years later, 1948, the California Supreme Court struck down Dems on interracial marriage.
I think you and I have a lot to talk about after this.
I guess in closing, I would just like to say I'm against Proposition 8 because I would like my lesbian friends to be able to marry the women that they love, and I would like Republican senators to be able to marry the men that they love.
to our third issue in section 1, which is a local issue. The parties have chosen